Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing By Stealth in Sea, designed by David Thompson and published by Dan Verson Games. Alright, so here's the setup for the very first mission of By Stealth in Sea. In this game, you are playing as Italian frogmen who are literally riding torpedoes into a harbor so that they can destroy British ships. That is exactly as difficult as it sounds, especially on the first mission. So you're going to be controlling SLCs 1, 2, and 3, and they're going to be going through some pretty serious trials and tribulations as they try to wreak havoc in the harbor of Gibraltar. There are also 2 other maps for this game, so there are some other layouts upon which you can wreak havoc. But in the very first mission, your SLCs are not very advanced yet, so you've got 3 pairs of guys who are trying to navigate into the harbor and basically attach their warheads to British ships and blow them up. But there's a lot that they have to manage and go through on the way. So on each of these SLCs, you're going to see some of the same equipment. So everybody's got breathing gear, a wetsuit, transmission, a ballast tank, a battery, which gets 2 tokens, which is a relief, trust me, because without a battery, you're not going anywhere, and a warhead. You can also use these sheets to determine whether your teams are stunned or not. So the first time your team gets hit by a patrol boat, they'll be stunned, and they then have to unstun. You'll also notice that there are mostly 1s over here on these stats, but a couple have been upgraded to 2. This basically represents the amount of dice you'll roll when you're doing certain kinds of skill checks, and those numbers go up if you're playing the campaign and your SLCs survive from mission to mission and improve. So let's do a really quick overview of what exactly your SLCs have to go through in order to reach their goal, because it's a lot. It's not hard to manage, but it's a lot. So when you start the mission, you're gonna have what's called a forward positioning card. And this one is going to basically force you to perform 2 fault checks before you even begin the mission. And fault checks are fun because if you recall, we were looking at these little tokens over here. Fault checks are when something goes wrong with one of these, and it'll have different consequences in the game. So for every one of your SLCs, you're gonna have to draw fault cards. So this one, for example, is a fault in the warhead. A repair check is 6, which means that you have to roll a 6 on a d6 in order to fix it. Uh-oh. So you get to roll, but if you fail, the warhead from that SLC's card over here goes onto this card until you can repair it. There are a lot of bad things that can happen in your faults. So if something goes wrong with your wetsuit, you can end up stunned because that icy cold water just seeped in and got you. You can have problems with your ballast tank and not be able to go under the water. You can have problems with your transmission that impacts movement. And if your battery goes out, you're just done. This surge token on your breathing gear, if you don't lose it to a fault check, can be used to give you a free reroll at some point, but there's not very many of those available in the game. And the thing that's funny about the fault checks is that they can seem a little bit frustrating, but especially in the first mission, the original first attempt by SLCs to get into a harbor and blow up British ships was completely a failure because of equipment failures on the Italian side. So even though it might feel frustrating to you in that first mission, you're actually reliving history and you're dealing with all of the same craziness that the actual original SLC pilots had to deal with. Once you've done the forward positioning phase, you do a fault check phase, which means at the very beginning of your first mission, there's even more fault checks. But again, that gets better as you go through the campaign. So after all that fault checking, the tough part, you get to do the fun part, which is SLC actions. So SLCs, depending on whether or not they're stunned, have either 1 or 2 action points. So you normally have 2, you only have 1 if you're stunned. And one of the things that makes this game interesting is that if you use both of your action points, there's a lot of things that you can do for a guaranteed success. But, and I forgot to put the time token here, you are running out of time. You cannot do things the slow way the whole way. You're going to have to speed it up. And that means that if you want to take 1 action point to try to get something done, you're going to have to perform a skill check. So for example, I can always just move 1 hex for free and have it be successful for 1 action point. But if you want to do what's called a full move, where you get to move straight ahead up to 3 spaces, you can have an automatic success on that for 2 action points, so your entire turn. Or you can roll a die and hope that you get a 4 in order to perform that action. And then you can use your other action point to do something else. The game will come with this awesome player aid that basically tells you all the things you can do. So you can move, change direction, dive, come back up to the surface, evade nets, so you're going to need that when you want to get in here, recover, when you've been stunned, repair when you've been damaged, detach and attach your warheads, because it can't just be easy to blow up ships. You have to have multiple steps in the process. You can do some attacks from your SLC if you're getting desperate. And then you can scuttle your SLC, which means that the enemy cannot pick it up and escape. Because the idea of the game is not only to blow up the ships, but to make sure that they can't figure out exactly how it was done and that they don't catch you on your way away from the scene of the crime. One thing you might have noticed is that there are dive and surface options. There are also different statistics for skill checks related to whether you are surface, which all of these are right now, or submerged, which means that you go under the water and move beneath the surface. So a full move when you're submerged is only 2 spaces. When you're surfaced, it's 3. However, you're going to want to spend a lot of the time in the game submerged, because it also means that the enemy has a harder time seeing you. Because after your actions, the British get to go through the harbor defense phase. So for the harbor defense phase, you have this harbor defenses strip. This is going to get more advanced as you play through the campaign, and the British are going to get better at detecting you. They're going to create eventually an underwater dive team. They are going to eventually have shore-based mortars to try to get rid of you. But just as you are new, so are they. So they just have normal searchlights. They have some patrol craft. And there's different stats depending on whether you're surfaced or submerged when it comes to whether they're going to be able to see you. Patrol craft movement, and whether patrol crafts hit you when they attack. There's also some stats for the anti-torpedo net. Basically, you have to roll an ops check to get through this netting, and the British are going to make it harder for you as the game progresses from mission to mission if you're playing the campaign. So the way that you find out whether you passed any of these searches, so if the British are searching for you, they have to hit certain targets in order to actually see you. And for that, you're going to be using what's called the alert deck. And the alert deck is interesting because basically you're just hoping that you don't draw cards that are of too high a value. For example, during the searchlight phase, if you are surfaced, you have to draw 10 to be seen by the searchlights. If you are submerged, it has to be an 11. So let's see. In this case, SLC1 would have already been spotted because we have an 11. At which point we're going to put a detected token on them, like so. And it's also going to be easier for patrol craft to come and spot us. So that means that during the patrol phase, a patrol craft is going to appear exhausted right in front of this SLC. We have 1 turn to try to figure out how to get away from it, and after which it will flip over and try to get us. So depending on how you roll, how your checks go, there's a lot of drama. The alert deck is also very interesting because the card that you're dreading is this 12, because what it does is it's not only the highest value in the deck, so you know that you're in trouble when you draw it, but it says remove the lowest number of cards from the discard pile and shuffle the deck. So what that means is that if I had drawn a couple of 2s in here, there's only 2 in the entire deck. If at the point of drawing the 12, those 2s would disappear from my discard pile and I would never see them again in this mission. So basically higher and higher numbers populate your shrinking alert deck as the mission goes by, and that means that it's easier and easier to get detected. So you don't want to waste a lot of time. You want to get in, blow things up, and get out. However, as you can probably tell, that's a lot harder than it looks. So that's an overview of how the game works. And what's really cool about By Stealth and Sea is that you can play individual missions. So you can play just this mission where everything's going wrong, or you can choose a later mission and just play that with some presets that are ready for you. Your other options are to play a historical campaign that mirrors what actually happened in history, but of course is also responsive to your play. Or you can have a custom campaign where you get some choices about what you upgrade instead of having to wait for your technology to upgrade at a historical pace. What's really interesting about both campaigns is that your SLCs get better as long as they survive and are not captured, but the British also get better. So there are more patrol boats that can exist in the water. There are more and better defenses that can come into the harbor defenses phase. So basically everyone is responding to everyone else's success or failure mission to mission throughout the campaign. And the way it works is pretty simple, but has a really cool effect as your tech evolves on both sides. Let's have some final thoughts. So now for some final thoughts. There are a lot of things that By Stealth and Sea does that are really, really impressive. And I think primarily the best thing about this game is, again, that David Thompson is very sensitive to historical period. He gets really into his research, and then he creates games that really reflect the time period and the realities of what he was studying when he was making the game. So By Stealth and Sea is phenomenal in the sense that it gives you really, I think, a sense of how stressful and scary it was to attempt to ride a torpedo into enemy territory and set off a warhead. And also, he spent hours of time, and we talked about it, looking at records of what ships were in the harbor at what time, so that the setups would actually reflect real ships that were present at the time of each of these missions when they occurred. I also like that little bit of tension of, do I spend my entire action to guarantee success, or do I want to roll a die? I love the tension of that ticking clock, and I also really love the messes that you can get into with the patrol boats. Let's just say that a lot of my missions in this game have not gone well because I got detected, and then I could not get undetected in time. But that also leads to lots of strategic fun, like trying to use one of your SLCs to distract the patrols while letting your other ones slip into the harbor, do their dirty deeds, and escape. And of course, nothing ever goes to plan, but it's very, very fun to try. Every time I play By Stealth and Sea, I do end up getting really caught up in the tension of the game and the excitement of trying to stay hidden. And, it just gets ridiculous most of the times that I play the game. So if you enjoy games that really generate story as you play, then I think this is a really, really good candidate for you. That said, this game isn't quite perfect, although it is very good. Among the issues that I found with it are that setup is really a pain. All that accuracy in having all the right ships means that if you're actually trying to hunt down the ships that are on the rulebook setups, it's going to take a while. I spent a lot of time in setup trying to make sure that the right components were actually on the board, because there are so many components to sift through every time you want a specific set. If you want to cheat a little bit with that, you can get a counter tray and actually sort the ships by point value and just decide you don't care about the names. But that didn't quite seem right to me because I like things to be played correctly. It is also true that while the game does turn into something exciting every time, it can also feel repetitive because even with different maps, even with a campaign with changing abilities, essentially you are doing the same thing every game, which is start at one end of the map, move into the harbor at the other end, and choose from an array of options to deal with challenges along the way. So I really enjoy the game, but when I play it a lot of times in a row, it does sometimes start to feel a little bit played out. And then my last nitpick isn't necessarily fair in the sense that it's based on the fact that I've played most of David Thompson's games at this point, which is that By Stealth and Sea is good. I just don't think it's as stellar as Castle Itter or Pavlov's House. It doesn't quite have that same level of dread and tension that the Valiant Defense games have. And I think that's partially just a matter of personal taste. That said, I do really like this game. I think the campaigns are fascinating because I like that you're slowly ratcheting up your abilities and the British are responding to you. And every single time I play this game, I have had a really good time. Post-pandemic, I can see this being a really fun one to pull out, not only by myself, but maybe with someone else, and we can share control of the SLCs and have a really good laugh. Overall, if you want a game that takes you into an interesting historical period, that really immerses you in that and helps you figure out how that might have felt, and you want to try out a campaign that's really responsive to things that happen from game to game, but is still not a legacy game, then By Stealth and Sea might be very interesting for you. Overall, I give it an 8 out of 10 and a Dice Tower seal of approval. Happy gaming!